Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. You are here at a special time, 3 p.m. ET. You know, we are usually here at 4 p.m. ET, but we wanted to have Katie Tallo on, a special author, at a special time, and we are so thrilled to have her here today. I am your host, as always, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 13, going on 14 novels of suspense. My newest is Her Perfect Life, which you see plastered to the door behind me. And my new book, The House Guest, will come out in February, which is sort of Gaslight meets Thelma and Louise. And I can't wait for you to hear about that, actually. But as I said, today we have the absolute joy of welcoming the amazing and talented Katie Tallo, whose book, Poison Lilies, is out right now. And it is cinematic and atmospheric and unique and chilling with a wonderful old dog. And we will talk about Levi as the show goes on. And I'll look at all the people who are here today. Here's Susie Baldwin and Joanne and Pamela and Sherry. Hello, you all. And when I look over here, you know, I'm looking at the comments, and that means I'm checking out who has joined us today. And I am so pleased to hear you all. Susie Baldwin says, hi, Hank and Katie. Hi, Susie. We are glad. And here's Joanne. So hi from Barre, Massachusetts. Oh, that's great. And Pamela saying, aw, an old dog. Well, we will get to that. I promise we will get to that. It also has the main character, Augusta Monet, who is called Gus. And there is so much buzz about this wonderful book, Poison Lilies, and the New York Times absolutely adored it, you all. And that is a hurdle to get past. Let me tell you a little bit about what the fabulous Sarah Weinman said about Poison Lilies. Isn't this pretty? Isn't this just the prettiest cover ever? And look how Katie's wall matches. I love that. That's very, do you paint your wall for each book?
That's right. That's right. Yes. I have to be matchy. Yeah.
I love that. Sarah Weinman, let me read you, says, it's an exhilarating, frenzied ride of violence and betrayal. And she says, when I finished, I just wanted to read another Gus Monet novel. So this is the second. They are a series, but they can be read easily and gorgeously as standalone. So do not, if you have not read Dark August, that's okay. You can read Poison Lilies right now and then go back and read Dark August. Joanne says the cover is absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely so. Absolutely so. So Katie, when you saw that review in the Times, how did you find out about that? And what did you think when you read it?
I actually, the book had just come out, and I think I Googled something to do with it. And I saw it. And it usually is my publicist that alerts me to these things, but I happened to be the one to alert them, even though they knew it was coming. And it's a funny thing with the New York Times. Sometimes if you get a review in the New York Times, the following week, it can sometimes pop up as an editor's choice. Oh. And it did. But they were informed about the editor's choice before the review came up. So we sort of were waiting for the review. It was a funny thing, but I saw it and I was, it's all really new to me still. This is my second published book, and the first one got a little mention in the New York Times as well. Well, a review. And a
good review. Don't just gloss over that. A rave, fabulous review. Come on.
A review. And it's so new to me, and it almost feels, I don't know. I live in my little world in Ottawa. I tell my husband and my daughter, and we're all like, the New York Times. And we don't know what it means or how big that is or what anything, it's all very new and fun. And it just feels a bit like a dream come true sometimes, but I'm enjoying it. And that was just lovely to see. And it gets the book a little more attention, which is what I want people to read it. So
of course. And it is a marvelous and compelling work. If you're just joining us, and I see the names popping up, if you're just joining us, we're talking with the fabulous Katie Tallo about her new Poison Lilies. And we're talking about the rave reviews that she has gotten for this book. But I'm interested, I'm just going to push you a little bit on this moment. So you Google something else, and up comes Poison Lilies New York Times review, and you hadn't read it. So no. Now you have to click on it, right? You have to click?
Well, yes. And I mean, as I said, I'm Googling, it's not random. I'm Googling Katie Tallo, Poison Lilies, to
Right,
see
right.
if there's anybody talking about it.
Of course, as we all do, which that's what
As
you
we
do.
all do, but I do have a love-hate relationship with reviews too, and with, sort of Goodreads reviews can be a little bit biting sometimes, and I have to be careful. I made films for a long time, and you get a bit of a thick skin when you're a filmmaker, and you get a lot of critiques, and you realize, that thick skin is really good when you're a creative person, because you are open to all the criticism, and you're willing to see, okay, what needs to be. It's kind of like when you get notes from your editor. What can I improve? How can I change this? And so the early reviews for the first book helped me. When they pointed out things, I was realizing, okay, it's confusing some people that I'm doing this, or the pacing might need a little bit of work. And it was my first novel. Of course, I'm going to listen, but you can't take it all in. Some of it is just, things that you need to filter out, and either someone's angry with you for leaving a dog in a car on a hot summer day, a fictional dog in a fictional car, but you get angry people sending you emails and things. So I have to be careful that it doesn't seep back into my writing life, where I'm sitting writing the next novel and I'm thinking about those reviews instead of thinking about the work and the character and the moment I'm in. And that is something I can't control. I can only write, but I can't control how people receive it.
I mean, it's
So,
interesting, and I think you're so wise to have such a balanced reaction to it. I agree that your work in video and films has probably made that be easier to do, because people who are discussing your work with you, who want you to be a better you, that's a different thing than when someone says, I hate first person books. Okay, that's fine.
yeah. Or yeah,
But it's not,
I didn't finish reading it.
exactly. So we have to learn about that. And all of us are just so crazy neurotic. I believe the bad reviews and not the good ones.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Why is
So I
that?
kind of stop reading them now. I don't, and I really mean that honestly. I don't look at them much. If I see that there's a 5-star somewhere, I'll read it, because I know it's going to be a
Yes.
nice compliment or something. But it's not that I'm just looking for nice, but you're right. You get a little bit attached to those niggly 1-star reviews,
I
and
think about it
and it
for
is really, it's so subjective, and we can't please everybody, and not everybody wants to read a mystery with a dog in it, or you know
I mean,
that's not.
and when you think of it that way, we're all going crazy with talking about this now, but I think it's fascinating. When you think about it that way, there are books that some people love that other people don't love. There are books that I've loved that my husband doesn't love, and the other way around. I suggested a book to him the other day, and he started reading it. And I said, "This is one of the best books I've ever read," and he started reading it and said, "I just don't see it." And we're both smart people and wise readers, and we just have different tastes. So I agree with you. You are wise, Katie. We just let it go. Although looking for nice, you said, I'm not looking for nice. Sounds like a good autobiography.
Yeah, yeah.
Looking for nice. And Darlene is saying, I always want a mystery with a dog in it. So there you go. Darlene is with us here.
And Darlene, I do not kill the dog. That's really important to know.
And it's a series. So we'll talk about Levi in a minute, this fabulous
Mhm,
dog Levi in a minute. But
mhm.
you can read these books, and you can get attached to Levi, as we all have, and not
Mhm.
have to worry about what will happen. Let me tell you, if you've just joined us, we are talking about Poison Lilies by the fabulous Katie Tallo, and you have found us here as always on Tuesdays at 3 and sometimes 4, or 4 and sometimes 3 p.m. ET on A Mighty Blaze. And A Mighty Blaze was formed, 2.5 years ago at the beginning of the pandemic by the fabulous powerhouse team of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us all together and to keep this reading and writing community together, and discovering new books and talking to our favorite authors, and maybe meeting some new favorite authors. That is why we're here. And my personal goal is to get your to be read pile to go up and up and up and up and up. And that is what our goal here at Crime Time. And that's why we're talking about the fabulous Poison Lilies with Katie Tallo here today. I'm going to talk to you for about 30 more seconds to tell you some quick background on Katie Tallo herself so that you know a little bit about her if you don't know her already. Katie grew up in the suburbs of Ottawa. An avid swimmer and moviegoer, she loved dreaming up plays for her friends to act out. She went to movie camp. I want to go to movie camp. They still have this. And took theater workshops, which eventually led to her landing the role of a spinster librarian in a grade 8 school play. But is that The Music Man? It wasn't The Music Man.
No.
No.
Written by the teacher.
It was what?
It was written by the teacher.
It was, oh, that's adorable. And she called it a spinster, which I don't think we would do now, right?
You know, I did a voice. I got the role.
Congratulations. And see, and she says, and Katie says in her former biography, that was the pinnacle of her acting career. So she moved to the other side of the camera. Let's just put it that way. She enjoyed a different and award-winning career as a screenwriter and director, so she could be telling actors what to do, right? No longer the actor. Collaborating on projects in animation, television, and motion pictures. Her films screened at the San Francisco International Film Festival, the Sudbury Cinefest, Local Heroes International Film Festival, and the NSI Film Exchange. So that's amazing background. We should talk about that. But after her first ever manuscript, Gone Monday, won a prestigious prize, that's when Katie began writing another novel with her trusty golden retriever by her side. That became her publishing debut. The thriller Dark August is set in the Wellington West neighborhood where she lives with her husband, Andy. The novel became an international bestseller, and now the follow-up to Dark August brings back her feisty protagonist for another case in Poison Lilies. And Katie, your beloved dog lives on, as you say, in both novels. You said you had a photo?
I do. I have I have to stand up to get it.
We'll wait to see a picture of a dog.
You'll have to bear with me. Well, this is one picture of my lovely Levi.
Oh, what a cutie.
He loved the snow.
Oh, that's great. That
Yeah.
is good. Well, it's wonderful that you'll immortalize him in
Yes.
this novel. And we'll talk more about that in a minute, of course. But I want to talk to you about secrets and families and relationships and more on that in a minute too. But first, tell us about Poison Lilies. Just tell us about the book so we know a little bit about what's between the covers.
Well, if you haven't read Dark August, like you said, that doesn't particularly matter. It's about a young woman, Gus Monet, who moves into an old apartment, sort of an Art Deco apartment, run down, very creepy. And buildings are a favorite thing of mine. If you've read Dark August, you know there's an old house that she moves into. Anyway, she moves into this apartment, and across the street, one of her neighbors across the hall is an elderly woman. They become friends and they hang out, and her and Levi go up to the apartment, and they share dinners and become friends. When a body turns up in a pond nearby, this woman tells her that she thinks she knows who that might be, and it's got something to do with her past and her rich relatives and some secrets that she has kept for decades. And it's part of the reason why she's never left her apartment, the older woman. And so Gus becomes embroiled in this mystery. She is not a detective, but she's got the amateur sleuth in her bones because she solved her mother's murder in Dark August in the first book. And she shared this story with the woman. So the woman asks her if she would help her solve her mystery and the cold case that she believes is to do with this body. So she's sort of dragged into someone else's mystery in book 2. But still, it's her wheelhouse of digging into the past, digging into a cold case, and one again steeped in secrets of a very wealthy family that happens to be the relatives of this woman. So,
and combined with secrets of her own that she has. I mean, Augustus Monet is a fascinating character. Tell us a little bit about where she came from in your brain. Did the story come first or Gus come first? How did that work?
I think the story came first. I mean, I have to track everything back to Dark August because that is where I had written a screenplay about 2 decades ago, and it was called Gracie's Kiss. And when that screenplay never got made into a film, as some don't, some do. And it sat on a shelf for a while, but the character of Gracie, this kind of quirky character that was in that screenplay, always stuck with me.
Mm.
And I felt like she was kind of hovering around on the edges of my creative life for a long, long time. And then after winning that novel contest, wanted to write another novel. I couldn't get that first one published, but I thought instead of self-publishing, and which involved, in my mind, spending a lot of time marketing and not writing, I decided to shelve that and write another one. And Gracie's Kiss, the screenplay, kind of bubbled up again. So I turned it into a novel, took elements from it. So the story has a little bit of the setting of the town of Elgin and some of the characters. But Gus, I needed someone to ground it. And Gus kind of came to me as a character to ground that story. I needed someone more interesting, or more, I guess, more of someone people could connect with, because Gracie was a bit odd, very odd. And, she makes taxidermied friends out of roadkill, and she's macabre. She's a bit bizarre. So she is not somebody would relate to necessarily. So Gus evolved out of kind of out of thin air, but I also developed a character that I knew my daughter would love. My daughter loves mysteries, and she's in her 20s. When I was writing this, she was in her 20s. She's turning 30 next month, or this month. Next month, yeah. Anyway, time's flying. Anyway, I wanted her to connect with this character. So there's a bit of me in the character. There's a bit of my daughter. There are things we like to talk about and think about, and that became this character. And she lost her mother quite young, and the mother-daughter relationship is so important to me in my life and really important to Gus. And I wanted to raise the stakes for this character and really make her life one of disconnection and loneliness, but it sort of makes her fearless in a sense. She is a person who has nothing to lose because she's lost it all already. And so she is willing to go into that dark basement or go into that ghost town in the middle of the night, and places I wouldn't go. I'm not that fearless, but she evolved from us, but into someone much more courageous, I think. So she's able to do what she does in that novel and this next.
And we love Gus. I mean, she's great in every way. She's fallible and vulnerable, but smart and truly loving, and devoted. And the book is about relationships, especially familial relationships. And we can talk about that in a minute too. But I'm so curious about her name. I mean, you're such a genius at coming up with people's names. Where did Augustus Monet come from?
Well, she was originally Charlie. I really like sort of male names, or names that could be both male and female. I don't want it to sort of lean one way or the other. I feel there's like something about it that's more interesting and maybe a little tough or tomboyish. So she was Charlie Monet, and it was just a name that came to me. A lot of names just come to me, but it wasn't. I had written a whole draft with Charlie in there.
Oh,
early drafts, and it wasn't really clicking for me. And it is interesting you say I'm a genius with names, but it has to be the right name.
Yeah.
And as soon as it is, that person imbues that character. And so there was something missing in those first drafts. And once I found her, then I figured out, why would they name her Charlie? Okay, so where's that coming from? And then I came up with this whole story about her dad, and I dug more into who he was. And he was a fan of the Masters, loved watching the Masters. My husband is a big Masters fan, and we watch it. And what I love about the Masters is Augusta, Georgia, and the beautiful scenery and the land, the way they film it at the Masters. I don't care about the golf. But her dad loved the Masters, so he named her Augusta. And when I felt like that was right, that started to click, and the character started to click. The dad became Charlie, and it all started to sing after that.
Isn't that amazing how our minds work? I love this. You bring tears to my eyes with that story. It's marvelous. I had a character in The Murder List, the main character of The Murder List, who I wrote a lot of the book with her being named Gianna Delaney, which I thought, oh, that's a great name. Gianna Delaney, that's a great name. And she just wouldn't even move on the page. I kept poking her and she wouldn't do anything, and she had no intent, and she had no motivation. And I thought, okay, so maybe this isn't her name, maybe this perfectly good name. So I changed her name to Rachel North. And she just sat up and she's like, watch me now. I mean, she had an attitude, she had a goal. It was just amazing how different. And I think I'm looking over here at all of your names. Names are powerful, says Diane.
Yeah.
We connect with that. As a reader, we know when you, the author, have picked exactly the right name. I completely love that. Now, going forward a little bit in this book, because I can't believe we're talking for way too long. Don't forget, you all. You can't remember because I haven't told you. I totally forgot to tell you that Katie is giving away a signed hardcover. Hold that gorgeous thing up. Not this one, because I'm keeping this. A signed gorgeous hardcover of Poison Lilies. If you just leave a comment or applause or a praise or some hearts or how much you love dogs or your favorite dog names. And Katie will also include loot. We all love loot, a beautiful postcard and bookmark and all kinds of stuff in the signed book. So just leave any kind of a wonderful thing in the comments, and we will spin the wheel of fun at the end and see who wins Katie's book. You were talking earlier about how Gus would go places that you might not go, or that someone might not go, because she has nothing to lose. And that is such a wonderful way of looking at it. You were on we read, Hannah Mary McKinnon and I read from Poison Lilies on First Chapter Fun a couple weeks ago. And it was your first chapter is so compelling. Diane says, I just grabbed Dark off of click. That's wonderful, Diane. And the beginning of this book is so intense and so powerful and so scary. Why did you decide to start with that? Really multi-layered moment, because we aren't really quite sure what's happening. And don't give it away, but just why did you decide to start in that place?
I think it's a little bit of the opposite of what I just said about Gus having nothing to lose. Now she has something to lose. And she's in a real predicament, and the stakes are much higher for her and very different for her for the first time. You're just making it hard for me to not.
I know. Okay, so let's go on. So anyway, that was a very emotional, brilliant way of starting it, because we care about Gus and her life instantly from that first chapter, and we want to see how she got there and what happened. And it was really, really gripping. If you want to hear the first chapter, you can listen to it on First Chapter Fun, but don't go, not right now.
So amazing. Her read was so amazing too.
Yeah, Hannah's great.
Hannah's like an actress, and she just put all the emotion.
It's wonderful to hear something with a British accent. It just sounds 1,000 times. No matter what I do, I can't sound it. But this book it is Joanne. The book is so intriguing. The book is about families and family secrets. And I want to talk about the building in a minute, but a truly unique character in Poppy Honeywell, who is sort of a Miss Havishami kind of character. You sort of envision that in her pink kimono and not going out of her apartment for years. Talk a little bit about her and the family she came from and where that came from in your brain.
Well, I wanted her to have not left the apartment. I wanted that Havisham feel, because I find it very tragic and heartbreaking, for one. But also Poppy is almost the opposite of that. She is so light and lovely and bouncy, and is harboring something very deeply tragic, but she isn't. She's many things, and she kind of comes out of her shell, which is nice. And she's, what I wanted though was for her to be a part of that apartment, as if she is another piece of it. And it's important because then Gus can step into history. It's a cold case, and not only does she dig through old, maybe archival items or materials, but she can literally walk into history, walk into decades earlier by walking into that apartment because nothing's changed. And in fact, there's a locked room in that apartment that hasn't been opened since that tragic day. And she gets the key. And I have always loved going to, let's not say garage sales, but maybe estate sales. I don't mean it in a morbid way.
Mhm.
Walk into a house and see the way someone lived. And I find it fascinating. I don't know what it is about people's things and artifacts. And it's like you're seeing a little bit of history and the
Sure.
past and the way people live. I find that, especially when things have been abandoned. And part of the genesis of this novel came from, I knew I wanted to continue Gus's story from Dark August, but the germ of the idea came from this article I read about a Paris apartment that had just been opened after 7 decades. And a woman had left the apartment, turned the key, and during the war and gone to live in the south of France and never returned. And when they opened that apartment, it was exactly as she'd left it. There were paintings on the walls, there were perfume bottles on her vanity. There was a layer of dust over everything, but underneath it were these treasures. And the archivists you could tell they were just so excited to go in there and dust it off and see and there was a painting that was worth a lot of money in there, and there were different treasures, but really it was just that it had been left and stood still. And I love that. I even talk about it a little bit when Gus and Levi move into the apartment and see the scratches on the floor and realize those are other people that live there. There's a history, even if it's just in the marks on a hardwood floor or chips on a wall. It's things that tell us that other people were there and their ghosts are still there. And the ghosts of the past are kind of all around
Well,
us.
it's time travel. It's time travel. That
Mm.
apartment in Paris is completely time travel.
Well,
And the
yeah.
things that people keep and why, each
Mm.
item, each object has a story. When you
Mhm.
held up the picture of your dog, your face completely changed. And we know that things happened in that relationship. Or I have one of my cat Lola had a favorite cat toy 20 years ago, and it's sitting on this desk still. And what you would say, why does she have sort of a ratty looking blue mouse? Well, that's from Lola. So
Well, I have Levi's leash hanging at my back door still, where we hung it and it's just there. I barely notice it most days, but on occasion I'll give it a little tap. He's still around.
And that is lovely. It is lovely. And Poppy's past and Gus's past are full of these fascinating, amazing people. Talk a little bit about the cast of characters in this novel.
Well, the Muchmores are Poppy's family, extended family.
Muchmores. Did I tell you all about the name? I mean, there couldn't be a better name. Go ahead. I'm sorry for
Well, the
interrupting.
Muchmores, it's funny, Ottawa. I love to have little bits and pieces of my hometown in here. It's set in my hometown, and it's set in the Glebe, a very old area of Ottawa that has beautiful old homes in it. And the building, the Ambassador Court, is an actual building here in Ottawa. I've never been in it, so I've imagined the inside. I've seen a few of the apartments for sale, so I've perused the photographs, so I have a sense of what it's like inside, and I've looked into the history. So, but it is a real building. And the Muchmores, I don't think there's a family, because I've tried to search and it doesn't look like there's anyone in town. The name is an Ottawa name, though.
Oh.
And there's a public school named Muchmore Public. So it is a name. And a lot of the little restaurants and stores and things are real places. But and I get a lot of emails from people who live in Ottawa and say, I can't believe I was reading this novel and you mentioned my store and my Metro on the corner.
That's okay.
Yeah, but sorry, I diverted from your original question. The Muchmores. The Muchmores are a wealthy family who have a foundation based on charitable works, and their history is steeped in charitable works way back to this fire in 1900, which is an actual fire that happened in Ottawa. But I've fictionalized what happens around that fire and their family, and their history is based on a lie and a secret. And they have a lot to lose. And Poppy and Gus are starting to dig up that secret because of that skeleton that turned up. And so, yeah, the Muchmores are a scary bunch. They have the elder statesman, the older gentleman who is the patriarch of the family. His children, May and her husband Ricker, they are kind of running the foundation, but May's always been pushed a little bit aside because she's a girl, and they're very patriarchal. There's a lot of history there and layers to that family. They have a few scary henchmen that they call their chauffeurs, but they do a little more than that. And they get a little scary and threatening at times when Gus crosses the line, as she tends to.
She can't help it. She cannot help it.
Can't help it. No, somebody doesn't want a secret unburied. She is right there. She's going to do it.
And I love how you show us how what this family is and all the undercurrents and motivations. There's so many wonderful set piece scenes, but there's a scene at a gala dinner where Poppy comes out for the first time that is just brilliantly fantastic. Talk about writing that scene and what that meant.
It's funny you call it a scene because you're like me. You call them scenes, not chapters. And we see the movie in our heads, right? Yeah. I'm sure you do too with the background you have. It's all just visual. And for me, I walked into that gala with them, and that's what I do when I'm writing. And I'm really acting it out in my head. I'm saying the dialogue. I'm feeling it and seeing it. And it's all, like you said, it's about the set and how that is impacting the lighting and who's seeing what, who's sitting where, how they're moving through the crowd, and every nuance. Then when you're at a gala, you're supposed to be a certain way, and there's a facade, and people are acting how they think they should be acting. And so when that starts to crumble, or somebody misbehaves or gets a little drunk or says something they shouldn't, then people are maneuvering like a dance, including the waiters. I just see it as kind of a real ballet between the matriarch who comes over and almost disrupts the whole table, and the table of misfits, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to say, who hasn't been sat at the table of misfits, as Gus is?
By the washrooms.
Terrible kids and the horrible guy and the miserable wife and the nerdy seeming person who's from out of nowhere and the spilled drinks and the crazy kids. And I just stood and applauded. This is all we're all talking about, Poison Lilies, and it is absolutely a fantastic book. And don't forget to leave questions, because in about 5 minutes we're going to take your questions. So be asking.
But I had fun writing that scene, and I had fun writing the scene where they're in the rose garden, the sort of Keystone Cop scene where there's a big chase and Levi gets involved with the leash and the whole.
Two things about that, because I want to talk about Levi in a second, because we cannot talk about this book without talking about the dog. But I want, you have this marvelous background in filmmaking, and I wonder how that the visualization, the setting, the cinema, the action, the pacing, all of that is so much a necessity in filmmaking, how that plays into your writing.
Well, it's how I learned to write. For the most part. I mean, that was my foray into writing in my 20s, was screenplays. You're told, show it, don't tell it. Don't say they're nervous, show the sweat. Don't, always just describe. The descriptions are very minimal, and they're about showing it. What are we seeing? Set the stage, and then dialogue, of course. And so I learned how to write dialogue and show things, but also screenplays have a sort of structure that I learned as well. And that structure transplants beautifully onto any story, I think, and probably onto novels just as easily. I structure my novels around pretty much 3 or 4 acts, and I have turning points at the end of each act that launch the action into a new direction. There's usually a catalyst, which is something that happens in the beginning. There's a climax at the end. All these structural things that come from screenplay writing, I think I've put in my novels. Novels, you just get to stretch a little more and get to dig in a little more and take your time a little more, I think.
but the structure is there. And not only the structure, but your writing is so unique. I mean, it's some sort of bizarrely unique combination of really, really staccato and then
Mm.
absolutely lyrical at the same time. How do you
Oh,
think about your style when you're writing?
that's interesting you say that. It took writing a couple of novels before I started to feel that, okay, now I'm me. Now I'm writing like me. Now I'm hearing, they say to try and find your voice, but you can't just find it. You can't, I don't know where you get it from. You just keep writing. And I think that that rhythm I find when I write has to do with how the person, it's third person, or the first two novels are third person. Um, and so I'm writing from Gus's perspective to a certain degree. She's just not, it's not first person, but how she's feeling, how the intensity of the scene might be flowing. And then when something starts to come together for her in her mind, it comes through in little bits. Boom, boom. Oh, that piece goes there. That. But then if she's feeling um, exhausted or emotional, or there's something that's kind of, she's taking a moment to pause, it can come out a little slower and a little more smooth, and maybe runs on a bit longer and becomes more lyrical. It's like a
Music.
flow of emotion a little bit, and maybe a bit like music. I don't write, I don't have music on. I could never have music on if I were writing, but there is a rhythm you're hearing in your head. And I often say the words out loud. And sometimes I find even a sentence can have a bunch of ands in it that are necessary. And she went here and she did this, and she knew, and she stopped, and and it's like a rhythm. You don't, it's not always grammar that I'm
I
looking at.
don't hear you. I hear you.
That'll be corrected later or fixed up later. And even then, my story editor and my proofreader know that it's not always following the rules of grammar.
I mean, that's so funny that you say this, because first of all, when you read Poison Lilies, you all, and I want you to, and Dark August as well. And a couple more minutes and we're going to take your questions. So don't forget to leave questions. And also, you can win a copy of Poison Lilies and some fabulous loot if you leave a question or a comment. Leave a question. I've hit in my editorial letters that I get from my editor, the copy editor will have said something like, quirky grammar use okay for this author.
Right.
No, let it stay. I'm just gonna do that. And
Yeah.
because sometimes you do need that,
Mhm.
the extra ands and then the comma clauses that go on and on, because that's how the person is thinking.
That's right. That's right. And sometimes it's just whatever's flowing in the story at that moment. And I don't know where this, if I have a style or if it comes from somewhere in particular, but, and I don't think it's anything to do necessarily with screenplays, but it's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. It's
And
your voice. That's your voice.
what makes sense to me. Yeah. Yeah.
And
But
let's
interestingly, the voice in the third, I'm in the middle of writing book 3, which will be the final one in the trilogy.
oh
And it is written from a whole new perspective. So the voice is quite different, yet it's still mine. So I'm settling into it. It's a first person, and it's from a perspective of someone much younger. And so I had to find a bit of a rhythm, but now I'm finding that I can put my voice into it, even though it's different.
Isn't that so interesting? I mean, that is such growth as an author, isn't it? That you say, I'm going to step out. I mean, I heard you say the first 2 books are third person, and I thought, ooh, that means the next one isn't going to be. I was going to ask you about that. But that was a blossoming moment for you then to realize that, wait a minute, I'm a writer. I can write this another way. And that's kind of great.
Yeah, and I don't think people are gonna have I mean, sure, there'll be people who have a problem with it.
You're never going to know because you're not going to read those reviews.
But I think it'll be really exciting because I'm excited about it. It's very different from the other 2. It takes you on a bit of a spin, a tailspin. So you can't keep doing the same thing, I don't think. And maybe a series you can, that there's an expectation that here's what I've established, and I'm going to do this for 10 or 20 books, but I'm wrapping it up. And so I can do what I want.
Yes. And the rules are whatever we say they are.
That's right.
Let's go back. My last question to you, and I have so many more, but we're running out of time because you are just so fascinating. Is that not true? You all, I'm looking at the comments here. And Katie, when we're finished, look at the comments, because you will be very thrilled to read the questions and the responses and the adulation and the admiration and the.
I will. I told Hank I wasn't looking at anything because I'm not a multitasker. I'd be like reading what?
Exactly. No, it's very distracting because they're just coming in thick and fast. But do tell us about Levi the dog.
Levi was my first dog. We got Levi about 10 years ago, and he died when he was 6, unfortunately, very suddenly one day. And but he had been around when I was writing Dark August, and it features a dog, and I named the dog Levi, of course. And he's very much like Levi. Funnily enough, in Dark August, he's an old dog, and Levi was not an old dog. So he kind of became old, even though he didn't. But when I was writing it, he was really helpful because his little quirks and dogisms and Leviisms are in the book. And people who knew Levi read the book and said, "That's Levi. That's so him." And then if I was stuck, we would go for a walk, and he and I would walk around the neighborhood, and it's set around here, and I'd get inspiration. And so he was a big part of the creative process too. And then I carried him through to Poison Lilies because, nothing can happen to Levi. Now in book 3, it's 12 years later. So, dogs only live so long, but he has a lovely, lovely end, and it's beautiful. So no worries there.
Okay. Now I'm going to cry, but no worries there. It is so much fun to read about Gus and her relationship with Levi, that it's so sweet, and how Levi knows things and tells her things and telegraphs things, and how she can judge the world by what he thinks.
He's a great foil. Yeah. No, he's a great friend and companion, because she is in the first book very much alone and doesn't even want a dog. And she's like, what? Who is this creature? And he slowly works his way into her life, even though he's a pain, and works his way into her heart. And it's really lovely that she has him at the end. And then in book 2, he's part of the shenanigans, and he's always there, and he's always up for anything, up for a good car ride. And, or a judgy look when she's doing something.
Yeah, what she's great at. Well, we love him. We love him. And we love this book, Poison Lilies. And we have Levi sounds like an amazing dog, says Pamela Fry Priest. And Lynn says, love the dog companion. We get a lot of love for Levi here, of course. So let's take some questions from you all. Sherry is asking, are the books in your series standalones? I have a vote on this, but you go ahead, Katie. You tell about that.
I see it as a series in my head. Of course, I've continued her story from where we left her at the end of book 1 is exactly kind of where we pick up. But they do stand alone, and I've written them purposely that way so that if someone discovers one of the books, that they won't be lost or confused. And there's a little mention of some business that happened in the first book that kind of carries you in. And if you didn't read it, you'd be like, oh, that's curious, but oh, interesting. Okay. Doesn't affect the story. You can read one. And in fact, book 1 is a bit like her backstory. And I see it as her life story in a way. Book 1 is her story of her and a lot of flashbacks to her childhood. And book 2 is her kind of coming into her own and finding family in a sense. And book 3 is told from the perspective of that family. So it's really kind of a full circle thing. So I don't think it matters where you come in, but definitely all of them together make up the full story.
What a lovely way of putting it. I agree. That's great. Margaret, hi, welcome, Margaret, says, an old roommate used to tell me you play a great game of what if. Do you ever throw Gus an incident or feeling you don't like just to see what happens? Margaret, that's a great question. I mean, I guess what she's really asking is, do you know where you're going with the book as you're writing, or are you playing what if as you go along?
No, I think with book one, I definitely went along and threw stuff at her and then restructured. And it took a lot of work to kind of go forward and then go back and then say, oh, I should have done this. And so book two, I really plotted out. And I have I like to really work on the plot for weeks at a time before I start writing, so that I have a sense where I'm going. I have things figured out. I have a big board because, as you know, holding a novel in your head is
Yeah.
pretty tough.
Yeah.
And if I can just look up at my board, which I sometimes show people, I'll give you a glance. There
Oh,
it
I
is.
love this.
That's a
Ooh,
novel. But
I'm trying to read it now.
so I have this novel laid out, act one, act two, act three, different colors, different characters are different colors. So I see how often they appear and I
Yes.
can glance at the rhythm of the novel. And each chapter is sort of a cue card. And it's a rough idea. And then I start writing and it evolves from there. And definitely I throw my characters into those situations that I've plotted out, but then sometimes something happens. I might have thought when she goes in the bathroom at the Governor General's place and May confronts her, what are they going to talk about? I had an idea, but then suddenly May grabbed her by the throat. I had no control over that. She
I
just
mean,
did.
but then but you embrace that. You think, well, my
I
character
embraced it.
comes to life. Absolutely. Those are the moments that we hope for. Those are the moments that we hope for. Let's take another question. What is the last book that you read? What's a book that you couldn't put down? Asks Joanne. Oh, it's a hard one.
Well, the last book I read was a friend of yours.
Oh, of course, Hannah Mary McKinnon's Never Coming Home. Very good.
Put it down because she's done this wonderful thing where she's written a character who tells you right off the bat that they did it. And
I mean, it's so fun.
They're just trying to get away with it. And you can't, it's not a who done it, but are they going to get away with it? And
she has this mordant sense of humor, this really wicked sense of humor, really funny.
Right, it's really funny
for the bad guy.
And for a likable bad guy, that's a likable murderer, it's like, oh, how did she do it?
That's another good title, a likable murderer. You're coming up with a lot of them today. Let's take one last question. Who else has a question? I know we have more questions in the comments here. What is your favorite part of writing? Asks Sherry.
Oh gosh, writing can be hard, but I don't want to say hard in a whiny way. My favorite part of writing, I think, is what I just said earlier about May grabbing her by the throat.
Mm.
It's these moments where you're in it and you're in a scene and you're feeling and seeing it so much that the characters come to life and almost seem separate from you and they do something. You're writing it, but you feel like you're not controlling it at that moment. And that's really fun. I think that's my favorite part.
Just transcribing it. It's really great. I have one more question because I want to know the answer to this myself. Darlene is asking, was Poison Lilies always the title?
It was, actually. And that's pretty rare for me. Gracie's Kiss was the title of Dark August, but then it became a discussion with my publisher and my agent, and they were all saying, that sounds like a romance. I know it was based on a screenplay 20 years ago. So it was a name I barely even heard anymore as to how it would sound to the outside world. But they said it sounds romance. It doesn't sound thriller. And Dark August came to me and they really liked that because it relates to the darkest time in her life. Her name's Augusta. It kind of fits with that. But Poison Lilies, yeah, it was there. And I have a bad habit of having a title before I've even written the novel.
Why is that a bad habit? I think that's great. It tells you what it is.
It kind of helps guide me in some strange, it's almost like a sort of a signpost that you're going in a direction. It can be good or bad if it's not leading you down a path you want to go down. But in this case, it was good. And the third novel has a really cool title. So I'm pretty excited about where it's headed, but
I won't ask you about it because
it'll probably change.
No, well, you love the title, but when does it come out?
I don't know. I haven't, I'm still
Oh,
writing it. So, you know,
you'll
that
come back to Crime Time
I
to tell
am
me all about
hoping that it'll be 2024.
it. Okay, so now because now we're invested in Gus and
It won't
and
be too long.
we need to know what happens. Joanna's asking, yes, when does it come out? Hearts, we are all waiting for that. If you have not read Poison Lilies or Dark August, now you have 2 more fabulous books to add to your TBR pile. But one of you will be getting this book very, very soon. So let's spin the wheel of fun and see. Oh, I love that. And see who is going to win. Oh, I love this. And I really think there should be music. We should come up with music. Uh, See, Margaret in the back room. Yay, Margaret Lang. That's marvelous. Margaret is such a stalwart fan and comes to here at Crime Time all the time. And we're spinning it again because Mighty Blaze. Okay, no, Pamela Fry Priest and Margaret Lang. Pamela Fry Priest and Margaret Lang will both win copies of Poison Lilies. You lucky people, you lucky readers. This is absolutely great. Before I say goodbye to the fabulous Katie, let me tell you quickly about next week, and you will all want to be here. Another wonderful show, and we are double booked. As I always say, Crime Time is the only time it's good to be double booked. At 3 o'clock, you all, at 3 o'clock ET next Tuesday, look who we have. This is not great. Deanna Rayburn's Killers of a Certain Age. This is about 4 women who are of a certain age, and they are retired assassins because, of course. And what happens? Where does a retired assassin go when they may have more jobs? And they certainly, these women, may have been pushed out to pasture, but they still have their skills. This is a story that only the fabulous Deanna Rayburn could have written. You know her. She's charming and funny and hilarious and wonderful. And the queen of Twitter. Absolutely follow Deanna on Twitter. And we will see her at 3 next week. And then at 4 o'clock, now for something completely different, Ryan Steck. You may know Ryan Steck. I'll get the light out of the page. Ryan Steck, you may know him as the Real Book Spy. He is a wonderful reviewer of thriller books, spy books, adventure books, all kinds of thrillers, Ryan Steck. And he has decided to branch out of reviewing, although you can still find him at The Real Book Spy, and write a book of his own. The exciting, amazing adventure page turner thriller, you can tell by the title, Fields of Fire. So we will talk to Ryan at 4 p.m. ET next Tuesday. So I know that I am luring you to the show now, not to be missed. Get cozy, get comfy, get coffee, get tea, it's too early for wine, and come join us next week. This week, Katie Tallo, thank you. You are completely exceptional. This has been just great. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And you all, thanks for coming. We love seeing you here at Crime Time. Read the North, as they say. Katie is a Canadian writer. And so read the North. We are pleased to introduce you to a lot of Canadian authors. It's about time that happened. So anyway, all of you, as you know, I always say, it is always safe inside a book. Remember that. And we will see you next time on Crime.